You run the same coding job through Qwen 3 Coder and Kimi K3, and one bill comes back 4 times higher than the other. That cost gap is real and it compounds fast at scale. Qwen 3 Coder is the open-weight, cost-first coder, and Kimi K3 is the benchmark-topping flagship. So the real question is which one actually earns its price tag for your workload. Test 1. Cost per token. The number that should stop you cold is this. Kimi K3 output tokens run at $15 per million hours, so if you're running a coding agent that churns 10 million output tokens a month, that's $150,000 a year just in output costs. And picking the wrong model here means your unit economics are broken before you ship. One of the biggest problems I run into when using AI agents is turning their output into YouTube content I can actually use to market my product. That's why this video is sponsored by Subscriber, a tool that helps business owners connect their AI agents to YouTube and market their products without spending 10 hours every week creating content. You can connect Claude or ChatGPT directly to Subscriber. It then analyzes your business, website, and YouTube channel to help you create SEO-optimized video ideas, scripts, thumbnails, and even complete videos that actually match your brand. What I like most is that every week, Subscriber gives me a list of high-potential video ideas I can immediately execute, and it can even help edit videos for me, with or without my face, including videos like the one you're watching right now. It's easy to get started, and you can try Subscriber for free using the link in the description below. Now back to the video. I pulled the published pricing pages for both. Qwen 3 Coder 480B lists at 0.861 input and 3.441 output per million tokens, while Kimi K3 is 3.0 input and 15.0 output, which works out to 3.5 times cheaper on input and 4.4 times cheaper on output for Qwen, though Qwen does add a long context surcharge that can push output up to $43 per million, so watch that if you're running huge windows. Qwen 3 Coder takes cost per token, and it's not subtle, because 4.4 times cheaper on output is the kind of gap that changes whether a product is profitable, and that puts Qwen 3 Coder up 1-0. I've been living inside these models long enough to know that pricing page surprises hit hardest at the worst moment. So drop a comment if that long context surcharge just caught you off guard. Test 2. Coding benchmark performance. The objection I hear constantly is that Qwen is cheaper, sure, but if your coding agent fails on a complex agentic terminal task and you have to retry 3 times, that cheap token price disappears fast. So let's look at what the benchmark numbers actually say about raw coding ability. Watch what happens on Terminal Bench. Qwen 3 Coder scores 37.5. Kimi K3 scores 88.3, which is a chasm, not a gap. And both are vendor-published numbers, so the direction is clear even if the harnesses differ. On SWE Bench Verified, Qwen holds 69.6, solid for open source, but K3's third-party harness puts it at around 93%, a different league entirely, and K3 also sits at number 1 on the front-end code arena globally. Kimi K3 takes coding benchmarks because a terminal bench score more than double Qwen's is the safer signal when you need the model to actually complete hard agentic tasks without retrying, and that brings it to 1 each. Test 3. Output speed. The concrete number that frames this is 64 tokens per second versus 38, and in a coding agent running a tight loop, that difference is the gap between a workflow that feels instant and one where you're literally watching a spinner for an extra few seconds on every single step, which adds up across hundreds of tasks. On their own APIs, Qwen 3 Coder 480B hits 64.4 output tokens per second, and Kimi K3 comes in at 38.7. So that's 66% faster for Qwen, though I ran it twice to make sure because K3, on third-party hosts like Fireworks, actually reaches around 69 tokens per second, which flips that story entirely if you're not on K3's own API. Qwen 3 Coder takes output speed on its own API because 66% faster is a real throughput advantage for high-volume loops, even if third-party hosts narrow that gap for K3, and that puts Qwen 3 Coder ahead 2-1. So Qwen 3 Coder is ahead on cost and raw speed, but we haven't touched context, window, or deployment modality yet, and those 2 dimensions are exactly where the decision could flip for anyone running a massive codebase or doing screenshot-in-the-loop coding. So the next 2 tests are the ones that actually separate the use cases. Test 4. Context window. 1 million tokens native versus 256,000 native. And if you're indexing a monorepo with hundreds of files and your model hits its context ceiling mid-task, it doesn't just slow down, it starts dropping earlier context and the output degrades or fails completely, which is the failure mode this test is really about. Kimi K3's native context window is 1 million tokens, while Qwen 3 Coder's native window is 256,000 tokens, 4 times smaller. Though Qwen can extend to 1 million via YARN, and that extension carries a cost surcharge that can push output pricing up significantly. And K3's max output length is also 131,000 tokens versus Qwen's 65,000, so K3 wins on both sides of this. Kimi K3 takes context window because native 1 million tokens with no surcharge is the safer pick when your codebase is large and you can't afford context degradation mid-task. And that ties it up at 2 each. Test 5, Deployment and Modality, Apache 2.0 versus a custom commercial license. And if you're building a product where you need to self-host or redistribute the model weights without legal friction, the license is a blocker, not a footnote. And if your coding workflow needs to pass in a screenshot of a UI bug, one of these models simply can't do it. Qwen 3 Coder is Apache 2.0, fully open for self-hosting on Alma, VLLM, wherever you want to run it. But it's text only on hosted tiers, while Kimi K3 natively accepts text, image, and video input. So screenshot in the loop coding works out of the box, though K3's custom license does require a separate commercial agreement for large model-as-a-service businesses, so check that before you build on it. This one's a trade-off, not a clean sweep. Qwen's Apache 2.0 license is a genuine win for self-hosters and anyone building a product that needs to redistribute weights. But for coding agents that work with screenshots or video frames, Qwen's text-only limitation is a hard wall, and if vision is in it, K3 wins by default. Kimi K3 takes deployment and modality because native vision input is a capability Qwen 3 Coder simply doesn't have on hosted tiers, and that's a hard blocker for a growing class of coding workflows, which puts Kimi K3 ahead 3-2. Qwen 3 Coder wins on cost, speed, and license freedom. It's 3.5 times cheaper on input tokens, 4.4 times cheaper on output, and 66% faster on its own API. And the Apache 2.0 license means you can self-host it, modify it, and ship it in a product without legal friction. So for high-volume, cost-sensitive coding pipelines, this is the smarter buy. Kimi K3 wins on raw coding intelligence, context size, and multimodal input. Terminal bench 88.3 versus 37.5 is a massive gap on agentic terminal tasks. The native 1 million token context handles monorepos without a surcharge. And native vision input means screenshot in the loop coding just works, which Qwen 3 Coder on hosted tiers can't do at all. If you're running high-volume coding pipelines and budget is the constraint, pick Qwen 3 Coder. But if you need a model that handles screenshot inputs, massive codebases, and the hardest agentic tasks, Kimi K3 is the safer pick. Because when the downside of the wrong call is a broken agent at scale, you want the model that scores 88.3 on terminal bench and not 37.5. One thing that didn't make it into the benchmarks. Qwen 3 Coder's long context surcharge can push output pricing all the way to $43.01 per million tokens at the highest tier. And if your agent is regularly hitting the 256K to 1M YARN extension range, your actual cost could end up a lot closer to K3's price than you'd expect from the headline number. If you're still deciding between Kimi's lineup and want to know where K3 sits against a cheaper alternative, the video I'd watch next is DeepSeek V4 Flash versus Kimi K3, which goes deep on the cost breakpoints where the winner actually flips, and it's right up next.